Now, let's get into how we pour paint and how we open a paint can. First, of course, we want to be spot priming surfaces. Expert Gripper is a really great product. I like to use it because you can prime over latex and oil with only this product, but it's water soluble, which means it's a water cleanup. So what I like to do is use your 5-in-1 tool. This tool has apparently 5 purposes. It has a bit more than that. For scraping out your rollers, you're going to scrape them out like that. For poking holes in the paint can rim so that paint can drip back in, you're going to use this edge. You can use it as a scraper if you're ever short on a scraper. You can use it to hammer paint cans closed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can use it for all sorts of things. It's 5-in-1. Okay, so to open the paint can, we're going to take the flat edge here and move it around, work it around the can until we pop off that top. Okay, this is primer, remember? I'll point out, I'm over a 2-ply drop sheet here. I should even be a 4-ply drop sheet, but you never want to be having your base camp or your paint pouring area over a 1 layer of drop sheet, because if you make a big paint drip on it like this, right, and you leave that, it's going to soak through. Now, if it's over 2 or 3-ply of drop sheet, it's not going to soak through. And of course, I'm never going to leave a paint drip like that on the drop sheet. What I'm going to do is wipe it away so that it's dry. So that's going to dry out pretty quickly. And that way, if someone else comes by or my teammate comes by and steps in it, you know, it's half hour later, it's already most likely dried up if it's a latex product. Okay, so before I'm not going to take this can around on the job site. I want to use what's called a cutting can. This is an empty metal can that you can get from the paint store, and I'm going to pour it about 1/4 full. The reason for that is 2 things. Firstly, if I'm going around on a job site and I'm using a can this full, 2 things can happen. One thing can happen, it's going to be a lot more likely to spill. Now, when this can spills or gets kicked over or someone knocks it or it's walking fast and it drips, 2 things happen when we spill a can of paint. Firstly, we make a huge mess and we spill a can of paint on a customer's lawn. They get very upset with us. Of course, we have to clean that up and we're wasting time as well. The second thing, we lose a $35 or $50 can of paint, right? So it's twofold attack. So what we want to do is make sure we're using a cut can. Now, before I pour it into my cut can, I'm going to poke the holes around the edges here. Maybe 4 or 5 holes. Oh, keep my tools on my drop sheet here. And that way, when I pour it into the can, when I sweep it up with a brush after, it's going to all drop back into the can. So I'll quickly pour some primer into my cut can here. Pour it back, good. And now before that starts dripping, I'm going to brush up those edges and brush it back into the can. You want to make sure to really sweep it around back into those holes, because that way, over a multi-day job site, as you close your can, the lid's not going to get stuck and all gunked up with all dried up paint around the edges. And then to close it, I'm going to use this. So I hold my hand there, and we're good and shut. I don't recommend doing this test, to make sure it's shut very often, but just to prove that it is, good. Okay, so that's how we open and pour a can of paint. Now, how do we do it into a tray? Pretty much the same thing, but you know what, I'll do it with paint because we're going to be painting on the site a little bit later here. So I open up another paint can here. Poke the holes around the edges. And since these are both white products, I'll use a separate brush just to set a better example here. So I pour it into my tray, lift it up, brush it back into the can, hammer the can shut. Okay, great. So now I've been doing some brushing, some rolling. I'll take my roller, I'll dip it in. You don't want to be skimpy when you're getting paint on your brush or paint on your roller. You want to make sure that you have a good amount of paint on it. Almost as much so that it's not dripping. And I'll teach you the bang and load technique with a paintbrush in a second. But first with a roller here. So you're going to dip it in. Roll the edges off to make sure that you're not leaving streaks. And now you're ready to roll. So you're going to roll and again fill it up. And again, I like using a 20 mil pile usually because that way it holds the most paint. And I'm rolling the least amount of possible. And And of course, when actually doing paint coat and rolling application, you're gonna want to always have that on a pole for stability, and we'll get to that shortly here. Now, the bang and load technique with a paintbrush works as such. You want to be having as much paint on your brush as possible at all times. So we're going to bang and load. This means that I'm not going to dip my paint can here. Now it's dripping. What am I going to do? I'm not just going to wipe off all the paint, right? What would be the point of that? Now I have to dip 3 times the amount to get the same amount of paint on the substrate. Instead, what I'm going to do is the bang and load technique. So I'm going to dip my paint in, and while it's dripping, give it a quick bang against the sides. And now all that paint is going to be stuck in the brush. So the paint's being held in the brush. Now I can go and apply it to my surface. Am I going to go right in to make my straight line right now with all this paint on my brush? No, because the paint will sort of drip into there. And we'll see that when we get to paint coat application techniques. But for the moment, I'm going to bang and load, get a lot of paint on my brush. Now I'm going to wipe the paint off on the surface, and then when my brush has less paint on it, make my straight line.